The $800 wine bottle trembled in Claire's hand as Victoria Ashford's voice sliced through the Belmont's elegant silence. Remove those pathetic shoes. Now, I can't eat while looking at poverty. Every head turned. Crystal clinked to a stop. Charleston's wealthiest held their breath. What Victoria didn't know: those worn shoes contained 6 months of recorded evidence that would dismantle a billionaire empire. What Trevor Hawthorne didn't know: the invisible waitress he'd ignored was Dr. Claire Daniels, the surgeon who fought to save his mother's life. In exactly 90 seconds, both their worlds would shatter. But before I show you what happened when Claire removed those shoes, I need to know: would you have stayed silent to protect yourself, or spoken up and risked everything? Drop your answer below and hit subscribe, because this story has 3 twists you absolutely won't see coming. Now let me show you how a pair of cheap shoes became the evidence that exposed a $12 million conspiracy. 2 hours before Victoria Ashford would change everything, Claire Daniels moved through the Belmont's dining room like water. Fluid, essential, and visible. Saturday evening rush, 6:47 p.m. The scent of seared duck and truffle oil hung thick in the air, mingling with the sharp bite of expensive cologne and the sweet perfume that always accompanied Charleston's elite. Crystal clinked against china in rhythmic symphony as Claire navigated between tables, her notepad clutched in hands that once held scalpels. Table 7, a corporate anniversary party of 12, rattled off modifications that would have sent most servers scrambling for pen and paper. Claire smiled, Southern charm bleeding through her professional mask. So that's the Chilean sea base, no butter, extra lemon for you, sir. Ma'am, the filet mignon Pittsburgh style, sides of asparagus and the truffle mac. Hold the breadcrumbs due to your gluten sensitivity. And for the gentleman at the end, the duck confit with the raspberry reduction on the side because of your citrus allergy concern. She recited all 12 orders perfectly, never breaking eye contact, never checking notes. The shift manager, Marcus Richardson, caught her by the kitchen pass. Girl, those shoes are crying for mercy. When are you going to get some new kicks? His eyes dropped to her ballet flats, once black, now faded to charcoal gray. The leather cracked along the sides, the soles worn so thin you could see the outline of her feet. Claire adjusted the insoles discreetly, a habit she developed over 18 months. These work just fine, Marcus. Your bank account that tight? Because Ramon's been talking about employee advancement. I'm good. She cut him off gently, but firmly. Truth was, her checking account held $2,847.23. Enough for 3 months' rent on her efficiency apartment. Enough for new shoes, new clothes, a haircut that didn't come from a box, and bathroom scissors. But every dollar she didn't spend on herself went into a safety deposit box downtown. Insurance, in case her investigation went sideways. The shoes stayed. Marcus shook his head, but dropped it. Table 12 just sat. VIP reservation. You're up. Claire grabbed fresh water glasses, her body moving on autopilot, while her mind cataloged the evening's observations. The Belmont wasn't just Charleston's most exclusive restaurant. It was a confessional for the city's power players. People spoke freely around servers, as if poverty made you deaf. At table 9, she'd overheard a hospital board member discussing asset reallocation strategies. At table 4, a real estate developer mentioned expedited permitting through alternative channels. Her recording devices, embedded in those worn shoes, captured every word. 6 months of evidence, walking right past people trained not to see. She returned to table 7 with her appetizers, and the man with the citrus concerns smiled warmly. You remembered the allergy risk. Most servers forget. Cross-contamination with citrus can trigger anaphylactic response in severe cases, sir. Claire replied smoothly, then caught herself. The medical terminology had slipped out. She pivoted quickly. My mom had bad reaction, so I'm careful about that stuff. He nodded, satisfied. Crisis averted. But as Claire turned toward the kitchen, her eyes caught the reservation book at the host stand. Table 12's name made her pulse spike. Hawthorne, 18 months of preparation. Tonight, the man whose mother she tried to save, the man whose business partners had destroyed her career, would sit in her section. She touched the insole of her right shoe, feeling the tiny recording device beneath the arch. Whatever happened next, the shoes would remember. The Belmont's atmosphere shifted the moment Trevor Hawthorne stepped to the entrance. Marcus materialized beside Claire, voice dropping to urgent whisper. That's Trevor Hawthorne. Owns half the waterfront development in Charleston. Forbes listed his net worth at $340 million last year. Don't make eye contact. Don't small talk. Just serve perfectly and get out. Claire watched from her position near the kitchen as manager Ramon Delgado practically sprinted to greet them. Trevor Hawthorne moved through the restaurant like he owned it, because technically his real estate conglomerate owned the building. He was 45 but carried himself younger. Tailored Tom Ford suit in midnight blue, silver threading his dark hair at the temples, a smile that probably cost $10,000 in cosmetic dentistry. He held the door for the elderly couple behind him, shook Ramon's hand warmly, tipped the coat check girl a $100 bill for hanging his jacket. Every gesture performed with practiced charm. But Claire had spent 3 years studying powerful men. She saw what others missed, how his eyes never quite reached his smile, how he commanded space without asking. Other diners instinctively moved aside, how Ramon's hands trembled slightly when seating him at the prime corner table overlooking Charleston Harbor. This was a man accustomed to unconditional deference. Then came Victoria Ashford, and everything about her screamed trying too hard. 28 years old, wrapped in a crimson Valentino dress that cost more than Claire's car. Her makeup, professionally applied but heavy, couldn't quite hide the desperation in her eyes. She wore her dark hair in an elaborate updo that seemed to fight gravity, and her neck dripped with diamonds that caught every light in the room. But it was the engagement ring that told the real story. 15 carats, emerald cut, platinum setting. Victoria angled her left hand constantly, adjusting her hair, touching her necklace, gesturing while speaking, ensuring every person in the restaurant witnessed proof of her ascension. When she passed table 8, she actually paused. Oh, this Tiffany. No, actually, it's custom. Trevor had it designed in Antwerp. 15 carats. I told him it was too much, but the woman at table 8 hadn't asked. Ramon assigned Claire to their table. She grabbed menus, champagne flutes, and the composure she'd perfected over 18 months. Trevor Hawthorne, the name she'd circled in red ink across 47 pages of financial documents. Margaret Hawthorne's only son, the man who'd inherited $12 million from his mother's accidental death, and never once questioned the circumstances. And he had no idea who was about to serve his wine. Claire approached table 12, professional smile locked in place. Good evening. Welcome to the Belmont. My name is Claire, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Victoria didn't look up from her phone. Trevor's eyes passed over Claire like she was furniture. There and gone, unregistered, irrelevant. We'll start with the Chateau Margaux 2015, Victoria announced. Her accent a strange hybrid of affected Boston Brahmin and native Georgia that she'd clearly tried to erase. And I'll have the homemade thermidor, she overpronounced the French, but prepared with the clarified butter on the side, not integrated. Trevor will have the dry-aged ribeye, Pittsburgh style. She snapped the menu closed, then looked at Claire for the first time. Did you get all that? Or do you need me to repeat it? The lobster thermidor with butter separated and the ribeye Pittsburgh preparation, Claire confirmed calmly. Victoria's eyes narrowed. It's pronounced thermidor, not thermidor. Perhaps invest in a French dictionary? Trevor Hawthorne glanced at his phone, completely detached from the exchange. On his screen, Claire caught a glimpse of his wallpaper. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, standing in a garden. Margaret Hawthorne, the patient Claire couldn't save. The mother Trevor had visited exactly twice during her final 8 months of life. Claire's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "My apologies, ma'am. I'll have that right out for you." As she turned away, she heard Victoria whisper loud enough for neighboring tables. "Can you believe the caliber of staff they hire here? I expected better for $400 entrees." Trevor said nothing, did nothing. His silence, the first of many moral tests he would fail tonight. Claire's hand brushed against her shoe as she walked back to the kitchen. The recording device captured everything. The unraveling began at table 14. Free Charleston Society women, old money junior league, the kind who'd summered in Europe before Victoria Ashford was born, sat 2 tables away from Trevor and Victoria. Their whispers carried just far enough. "That's the Ashford girl, isn't it? I heard she worked pharmaceutical sales in Atlanta before she landed him." My sister checked. "There's no Ashford family in the Charleston registry. Not one." "Well, the ring is real, even if everything else isn't." Victoria's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her spine straightened. The mask of confidence cracked just enough for Claire to see the terror underneath, the desperate fear of exposure that comes with borrowed belonging. Claire had seen this before. Insecure people don't implode quietly. They redirect. Victoria's eyes scanned the room for a target, landing on the one person with less power than her, the waitress. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice cut across the dining room with the sharp precision of someone demanding attention. "Excuse me." Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused midair. The Belmont's elegant ambience contracted into uncomfortable silence. Claire approached the table. "Yes, ma'am? Is there an issue with your meal?" Victoria's face flushed red, her finger pointing directly at Claire's feet. Those shoes, those absolutely pathetic, unacceptable shoes. How does this establishment allow staff to look so impoverished? It's disgusting. Every eye in the restaurant turned. Claire felt 40 pairs of wealthy gazes drop to her worn ballet flats. The cracked leather, the faded color, the soles so thin they barely separated her feet from the Italian marble floors. Ramon materialized instantly, hands raised in placating gestures. "Ms. Ashford, I sincerely apologize if—" "No." Victoria stood now, her voice rising, the desperation bleeding through her affected accent. "I'm paying $400 for a meal I can't enjoy because I have to look at poverty on feet. I demand she remove them. Immediately. I will not eat while staring at that embarrassment." The entire restaurant held its breath. Trevor Hawthorne sat motionless, eyes on his phone, jaw tight. He could have stopped this with one word. He said nothing. At table 8, someone pulled out their phone. At table 11, a woman gasped softly. The society ladies at table 14 exchanged knowing looks. Victoria Ashford had just confirmed exactly what they suspected about her class background. Claire's mind calculated faster than her heart could race. 18 months, 643 hours serving in this restaurant, 217 recordings collected, evidence documenting medical fraud, insurance schemes, real estate corruption. All of it stored in the tiny devices embedded in the insoles of these exact shoes. Exposure meant risk, meant potentially losing everything she'd built, meant people would ask questions. But as she looked at Victoria Ashford, desperate, cruel, wielding borrowed power against someone she perceived as defenseless, Claire saw Margaret Hawthorne's face, saw the patient file marked accidental complications, saw the hospital board members who'd valued profit over human life, who believed a whistleblower surgeon could be crushed into silence because she was just one woman with ethics, but no power. This entitled disregard for human dignity. This was exactly what killed Margaret, and Trevor Hawthorne sat silent. Again, just like he'd stayed silent when his mother needed him. Claire made her choice. Of course, ma'am. Her voice was Mississippi calm, steel wrapped in honey. If my shoes offend you, I'll remove them. Ramon's eyes went wide. Claire, that's not niece. It's fine, Ramon. Claire bent down gracefully, unlacing the first shoe. Her fingers worked slowly, deliberately, giving everyone in the restaurant time to watch, giving Trevor Hawthorne time to see what he'd been too important to notice. She slipped off the right shoe first, placing it on the table beside Victoria's $400 lobster thermidor. The custom medical inscription on the insole faced upward, clear as accusation. Orthopedic design by Dr. Claire Daniels, M.D. Patient, Margaret Hawthorne. Charleston Medical Center. Surgical recovery specialty. The second shoe joined the first. Victoria stared at the inscription, confused, not understanding the grenade she just pulled the pin from. But Trevor Hawthorne understood. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. His phone clattered to the table. His mouth opened, but produced no sound. Those cold, calculating eyes that had passed over Claire like she was furniture now locked onto her face with the force of recognition and horror. His voice cracked. Dr. Daniels? Claire stood in her stocking feet on the Belmont's cold marble floor, meeting his gaze with the steady composure of someone who'd spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. Hello, Mr. Hawthorne. It's been a long time since we last spoke. The day I told you your mother's death was preventable. The day you told me to stop making accusations I couldn't prove. Her voice carried across the silent restaurant, clear and unwavering. I've spent the last 18 months proving it. Victoria looked between them, her face twisted in confusion and rage. What is happening? Trevor, what is she talking about? But Trevor couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at the shoes, these pathetic, cheap shoes his fiancée had just forced into revelation. The shoes that contained the evidence that would destroy everything he'd built on his mother's grave. The Belmont erupted in whispers like wildfire catching dry brush. Trevor Hawthorne stood, so abruptly his chair crashed backward into the window. Red wine splashed across white tablecloth, bleeding toward Victoria's diamond-draped hands. Who are you? His voice, corporate confidence shattered into barely controlled panic. Claire remained still, standing in stocking feet, while 40 phones captured every angle. I already told you, Mr. Hawthorne, someone who tried to save your mother's life, someone you had destroyed for telling the truth. Ramon grabbed Claire's elbow, his whisper urgent and terrified. My office. Now, you're done here. But before he could pull her away, a voice cut through the chaos, elderly, firm, carrying the unquestionable authority of Charleston old money. That woman is Dr. Claire Daniels. Mrs. Chen rose from table 6, her silk scarf and pearl necklace marking her as Belmont royalty, the kind of regular who dined here for 30 years. She saved my grandson's life 4 years ago when every other surgeon said his spine injury was inoperable. She's not just a waitress, Ramon. She's one of the finest orthopedic surgeons South Carolina ever produced. The restaurant's whispers intensified. Phones angled higher. Someone at table 9 gasped. Oh my God. I recognize her from medical journal features. She was nominated for awards. Before she was stripped of her license for refusing to falsify patient records, Mrs. Chen continued, her eyes fixed on Trevor with the cold judgment of someone who'd known his mother. Margaret Hawthorne died in her care, but Claire fought to save her, fought the hospital administration when they tried to cover up malpractice, and she lost everything for it. Trevor's hand found the back of his chair for support. That's not. My mother died from surgical complications. Natural complications. Claire's laugh was bitter, brief, and utterly devoid of humor. Is that what they told you? Did you even read the autopsy report, Mr. Hawthorne? Or were you too busy accepting the $12 million insurance payout to ask questions? Victoria grabbed Trevor's arm. Trevor, what is she talking about? Who is this crazy? Sit down, Victoria. Trevor's voice was hollow. You've done enough. For the first time all night, Victoria went silent. Ramon released Claire's arm, stepping back as the power dynamics in the room shifted visibly. Dr. Daniels, I didn't know. I had no idea you were invisible. Claire finished quietly. That was intentional, Ramon. She gathered her shoes from the table, cradling them like the evidence they were. Her eyes never left Trevor's face. Your mother deserved better than the death they gave her. She deserved better than the son who never visited. And she deserved better than having her memory buried under your real estate empire. Claire's voice dropped lower, intimate and devastating. I couldn't save her 3 years ago, Mr. Hawthorne, but I can make sure her death meant something. 3 years earlier, Charleston Medical Center, ICU floor, 2:30, 7 a.m. Dr. Claire Daniels stood over Margaret Hawthorne's chart with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The post-surgical infection shouldn't have happened. Couldn't have happened if proper protocols had been followed. But the surgical notes in the file didn't match what Claire remembered performing. Times are wrong. Medication dosages altered. Her signature forged on documents she'd never seen. You need to sign off on these revised reports. Dr. Richard Pemberton, head of the hospital board, stood in the doorway with his expensive suit and rehearsed sympathy. Margaret Hawthorne's family will receive a substantial insurance settlement for accidental complications. Everyone wins. Everyone except Margaret, Claire whispered, looking at her patient. Alive but failing. Preventable sepsis ravaging her system because someone had cut corners to save time, to save money, to meet quarterly performance metrics. Sign the papers, Dr. Daniels, or your career is over. Claire refused, filed official complaints, contacted medical oversight boards, demanded investigation. Margaret Hawthorne died 2 weeks later. Preventable complications, just as Claire had predicted. Trevor Hawthorne attended the funeral, accepted condolences, signed paperwork for the $12 million insurance settlement. And when Claire tried to speak to him about the irregularities, tried to make him understand his mother was murdered by negligence and greed, he looked at her the exact same way he looked at her tonight in the Belmont, like she was invisible, irrelevant, nothing. Stop making accusations you can't prove, Dr. Daniels. My mother received excellent care. 3 months later, Claire's medical license was suspended pending investigation into fabricated claims and professional misconduct. The investigation, overseen by Dr. Pemberton's colleagues, concluded she was emotionally unstable and unsuitable for medical practice. Back in the Belmont, Trevor Hawthorne's face had gone from shock white to ash gray. You're lying. My mother's death was investigated. There was no investigation, Mr. Hawthorne. Claire slipped her shoes back on, feeling the recording devices press against her arches. 6 months of evidence, plus the 3-year-old recordings she'd made the night they destroyed her career. There was a cover-up, and you funded your empire with the profits. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Victoria, still frozen in her crimson dress and 15-carat denial. Thank you, Ms. Ashford. I was planning to reveal myself next month, once I had everything in place. But you just accelerated my timeline considerably. Claire walked barefoot across the restaurant, every diner parting like water. Behind her, Trevor Hawthorne collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. And Victoria Ashford finally understood. Some people aren't invisible because they're powerless. They're invisible because they're gathering evidence. Claire just exposed her identity to the most powerful man in Charleston. Was this brilliant strategy, or a devastating mistake that just cost her everything? Drop your tape below, and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether justice wins or power buries the truth one more time. Claire's efficiency apartment smelled like instant ramen and obsession. The walls hadn't seen fresh paint in a decade. The carpet bore stains from previous tenants. and a single window overlooked a parking lot where broken glass glittered under flickering streetlights. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the laptop on her thrift store desk, the external hard drive containing 6 months of audio files, and the transcription software currently converting Trevor Hawthorne's voice into prosecutable evidence. Her hands trembled as she pressed play on recording number 217, dated 4 months earlier. Audio, restaurant ambient noise, crystal clinking. Trevor Hawthorne. Richard, the city inspector is asking questions about the medical plaza permits. The accelerated approval timeline. Richard Pemberton. I told you, Trevor. My position on the hospital board gives us leverage. We approved the insurance settlements quickly, 63 cases total. And in exchange, the medical center purchases your commercial properties at premium rates. Everyone profits. Trevor. And if someone connects Margaret's case to the others? Pemberton. They won't. We handled the Daniels situation. She's serving wine now, not performing surgeries. Nobody listens to disgraced doctors working service jobs. Claire's jaw clenched. She stopped the playback, her reflection staring back from the darkened laptop screen. Exhausted, underfed, running on purpose instead of sleep. The Belmont exposure 3 days ago had been unplanned, reckless. Everything she'd built over 18 months now sat vulnerable to legal challenge, evidence potentially inadmissible because she'd revealed herself too soon. A knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, Dr. Marcus Reese, former colleague, current chief of orthopedics at Charleston Medical, the only person from her previous life who'd stayed in contact. She opened the door. Marcus, it's midnight. I know. He entered quickly, glancing down the hallway like someone followed. His surgical scrubs looked hastily covered by a jacket. Claire, what the hell happened at the Belmont? It's all over social media. Videos of you confronting Trevor Hawthorne. People are asking questions. Good. Let them ask. The medical board is calling emergency sessions. Pemberton is threatening lawsuits for defamation, and you just exposed yourself before you had legal protection in place. Marcus ran his hands through graying hair. Tell me you have something concrete. Tell me this wasn't just. Sit down. Claire pulled up file after file. Audio recordings, time-stamped transcripts, financial documents showing money transfers between Hawthorne Development and Charleston Medical Center. Insurance payouts for 63 accidental complication cases, each one rubber-stamped by Pemberton's approval, each one resulting in property purchases that enriched Trevor's empire. Marcus listened for 47 minutes, his face aging with each revelation. My God, Claire, this is systematic fraud. Medicare fraud, insurance fraud, maybe manslaughter charges for the patients who died from preventable. His voice broke. Margaret Hawthorne was my patient before you took her case. I knew her. She was kind. She was murdered by negligence and greed, Claire said quietly. And her son funded his empire with the profits. Marcus looked at the evidence spread across her apartment. The worn shoes sitting on the desk like artifacts. The recording devices small as buttons. These recordings, courts might not accept them. South Carolina's a 2-party consent state for recordings. If you didn't have permission, I'm aware of the risk. Claire's voice was steel wrapped in exhaustion. But federal prosecutors can use illegally obtained evidence if it leads to independently verified sources. These recordings give them probable cause for warrants, subpoenas, forensic audits. The evidence exists in hospital records, bank transfers, property deeds. I'm just showing them where to look. And if they don't prosecute, if they decide the evidence is tainted. Claire touched her shoes. Then I spent 18 months gathering the most detailed documentation of medical fraud in South Carolina history. And at least I exposed the truth. At least Margaret's death won't stay buried. Marcus stood, pacing her small apartment. You know, Trevor Hawthorne will come for you. He has resources, lawyers, connections. Let it come. Claire, I'm done being invisible, Marcus. I'm done letting powerful men decide who gets justice based on who can afford it. Her voice cracked, vulnerability bleeding through the armor. I spent 3 years losing everything. My career, my reputation, my ability to help patients. You know what I did last month? I watched a man choke at the Belmont. My hands knew exactly how to perform the Heimlich, but I hesitated because I'm not a doctor anymore. I'm just a waitress. And in that half second of hesitation, I hated what they turned me into. Marcus's eyes softened. You saved him anyway. I heard about it, but I shouldn't have hesitated. Claire looked at her medical degree, framed and hidden in her closet. Trevor Hawthorne will come for me, and when he does, these shoes will speak louder than any lawyer. After Marcus left, Claire sealed the evidence files in a manila envelope addressed to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of South Carolina. Whatever happened next, the truth was documented. Margaret Hawthorne would have her justice. Trevor Hawthorne's penthouse overlooked Charleston Harbor, but he couldn't see the view. He'd spent 3 days researching Dr. Claire Daniels, every medical journal article, every award nomination, every newspaper clipping about her license suspension. His laptop displayed a photo from 4 years ago. Claire in surgical scrubs, smiling, receiving the South Carolina Surgical Innovation Award for developing a spinal fusion technique that reduced patient recovery time by 40%. That woman, brilliant, celebrated, saving lives, was now serving wine at the Belmont because she tried to save his mother. Trevor's stomach turned. His attorney, James Whitmore, sat across from him with a leather portfolio and exhausted expression of someone who'd pulled 3 all-nighters. Trevor, we need to discuss strategy. Dr. Daniels has gone public with accusations of fraud. Social media is... Tell me about Victoria. Trevor's voice was flat. James hesitated. I don't think that's a priority right now. Tell me about Victoria Ashford. The background check you promised me before I proposed. James opened his portfolio slowly. There's no Victoria Ashford. Not in any Charleston registry. Not in Georgia records, not anywhere. Her real name is Victoria Brennan, former pharmaceutical sales representative fired from Morrison Labs 3 years ago for falsifying physician signatures on prescription authorizations. She's been using stolen credentials to infiltrate wealthy social circles. Miami, Atlanta, now Charleston. Trevor's hands clenched. You knew this. I discovered it 2 days ago when I finally completed the background check you postponed. James wouldn't meet his eyes. Trevor, you rushed the engagement. You didn't want to wait for... How long has she been working with Pemberton? Silence. James, how long? Phone records show contact beginning 8 months ago, 2 weeks before she accidentally met you at the hospital fundraiser gala. James slid documents across the table. Richard Pemberton introduced her to social circles, helped establish her fake identity, and positioned her to meet you. The working theory is that Pemberton suspected Dr. Daniels was gathering evidence and needed someone close to you to monitor threats. Trevor stood, walking to the window. His reflection stared back. 45 years old, $340 million net worth, built on money from his mother's preventable death. My mother called me 17 times in her final month, he said quietly. I answered 4 of them. I was closing the Riverside development deal. I told myself I'd visit when the contracts were finalized. James said nothing. She left me voicemails, asked if I'd spoken to her doctors, said something felt wrong with her recovery, said Dr. Daniels seemed worried. Trevor's voice cracked. I deleted them without listening to the end. I was busy. He picked up his phone, pulling up the wallpaper photo. His mother in her garden, 3 months before her death. The only photo he kept visible. The relationship he'd destroyed through neglect. When the hospital called to say she died from surgical complications, I accepted it. I signed the papers. I took the $12 million insurance settlement and paid off my debts. Built my empire on her death without asking a single question. Trevor turned to face James. And when Dr. Daniels tried to tell me something was wrong, I dismissed her, called her emotionally unstable, just like Pemberton wanted me to. Trevor, you didn't know. I didn't want to know. The admission tasted like ash, because knowing would have meant acknowledging I was a terrible son, that I chose business over visiting her, that I profited from her death. James closed his portfolio. What do you want to do? We can fight Daniels. Discredit her evidence. She recorded conversations without consent. No, Trevor. Schedule a meeting with Dr. Daniels. Private, just the two of us. Trevor looked at his mother's photo one more time. And get me copies of every document related to her death. The real files, not the sanitized versions Pemberton gave me. After James left, Trevor sat in darkness overlooking Charleston's glittering harbor, a city he'd helped build with blood money. His phone buzzed. Victoria, where are you? We need to talk about damage control. Trevor blocked her number. Some damages couldn't be controlled. Some truths demanded reckoning. And some sons needed to face what they'd been too cowardly to see. 3 days after the Belmont exposure, Trevor Hawthorne stood outside Claire Daniels' apartment at 11:47 p.m. No security detail. No attorney. Just a manila folder containing documents he'd spent 72 hours obtaining through connections, bribes, and one hospital administrator willing to trade evidence for immunity. He knocked. Claire opened the door wearing surgical scrubs, the ones she'd kept from her previous life, faded from washing, but still bearing her embroidered name. She held a kitchen knife, casually, not threatening, just prepared. Mr. Hawthorne. Her voice was carefully neutral. If you're here to threaten me, my attorney has copies of everything. I'm here to confess. That made her pause. Excuse me. Can I come in? Please. 5 minutes. Claire studied him. This billionaire standing in her hallway, with shadows under his eyes and guilt radiating from every expensive fiber of his Tom Ford suit. She stepped aside. Trevor entered the efficiency apartment, taking in the evidence spread across every surface, the worn shoes on the desk, the framed medical degree hidden in the corner. This was what his mother's death had reduced her to. I didn't know about the fraud, he began, voice cracking. Not when it happened. Not when my mother died. Pemberton told me surgical complications were common, that Dr. Daniels was emotional and making accusations to avoid malpractice liability. I believed him. He wanted to believe him. Claire remained standing, arms crossed. Believing him meant keeping the money. Yes. The admission came out like a confession. I was bankrupt, Dr. Daniels, completely underwater. 3 failed developments. Investors threatening lawsuits. My marriage had just collapsed. I was drowning. He opened the manila folder with shaking hands. When that $12 million insurance settlement came through, I told myself my mother would have wanted me to rebuild, that she'd be proud I used her death to create something. She wanted you to visit her. Claire's voice was blade sharp. You came twice in 8 months. She died asking for you. Trevor flinched like she'd struck him. I know. Do you? Because I was there, Mr. Hawthorne. I was there when she coded the first time, when I brought her back, and she whispered your name. When she asked if you'd received her voicemails, Claire stepped closer, fury and grief bleeding through professional distance. I was there when she died 3 weeks later from an infection that never should have happened if proper protocols are followed. And I was there when Pemberton told me to falsify records or lose my career. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead. Trevor laid out the documents. These are the real files. Margaret Hawthorne's actual surgical records, not the sanitized versions. I got them from the hospital's encrypted backup server. Turns out administrators keep insurance fraud evidence as leverage against each other. Claire's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. Times altered. Medication dosages changed. Signatures forged. Pemberton performed the initial surgery. Trevor continued, voice hollow. You weren't even in the operating room for the procedure that caused the infection. But when complications arose, he transferred her to your care and blamed you when she died. You tried to save her from his mistakes. Claire's hands trembled holding the evidence that proved what she'd been saying for 3 years. Why are you showing me this? Because you were right. Because my mother deserved better. And because Trevor's voice broke completely. Because I'm the reason you lost everything. When you came to me with concerns, I dismissed you. I told Pemberton you were making trouble. I gave him ammunition to destroy your license. The silence between them was suffocating. Claire sat down slowly. What do you want from me, Mr. Hawthorne? Tell me what justice looks like. For my mother. For you. For the other 62 patients Pemberton killed. Trevor met her eyes. I'll pay whatever. I don't want your money. Then what? I want you to testify. Claire pulled her worn shoes from the desk, holding them like sacred objects. Federal court, under oath. These shoes contain recordings of you and Pemberton discussing the fraud scheme. 6 months of conversations at the Belmont. But recordings aren't enough. I need corroborating testimony from someone inside the conspiracy. Trevor stared at the shoes. Those shoes have been recording me for 6 months? Every word, including the night you told Pemberton you suspected I was asking too many questions while serving your table. The night he said he'd handle it. Claire's expression was cold fire. Your fiancée's attack at the Belmont wasn't random cruelty, Mr. Hawthorne. It was planned exposure meant to discredit me before I could act. Victoria. Trevor's mind raced. She's been working with Pemberton. You didn't know? Claire almost laughed. The woman you gave a $2 million ring to is Victoria Brennan, former pharmaceutical fraud specialist. Pemberton recruited her 8 months ago to get close to you and monitor whether I was gathering evidence. Trevor's world tilted. The shoe, humiliation, was meant to make me look unhinged. A disgraced doctor so desperate for attention she'd fabricate accusations and were recording devices in her shoes. But Victoria didn't know, Claire smiled without warmth, that forcing me to remove my shoes would reveal the medical inscriptions. Your mother's name, physical proof of our connection. The apartment door burst open. Victoria Victoria Brennan stood in the doorway wearing designer athleisure in desperation. Trevor, don't listen to her. She's manipulating you. Dr. Pemberton explained everything. She's mentally unstable, obsessed with blaming others for her failures. Stop. Trevor's voice was arctic. I know who you are, what you are. James found your real background. Victoria's mask cracked. Trevor, baby, I can explain. You were sent to spy on me, to make sure I didn't discover the truth about my mother's death, to distract me from noticing the waitress gathering evidence at my dinner table. He stood, every inch the billionaire she tried to trap. How much did Pemberton pay you? This is ridiculous. $50,000 monthly retainer, Claire interjected calmly, pulling up bank records on her laptop. Plus the engagement ring you planned to keep after the wedding was quietly called off due to your incompatibility. Pemberton brokered an insurance policy. You'd get $5 million when the marriage failed, plus connections to other wealthy targets. Victoria's face drained of color. How do you? Because you discussed it at the Belmont. 3 months ago, table 9. I was serving your champagne while you and Pemberton finalized your compensation structure. Claire's smile was razor-edged. The shoes remember everything. Victoria lunged for the shoes. Claire moved faster. Years of surgical precision training translated into combat efficiency. She caught Victoria's wrist, twisted, and had her on the ground in 3 seconds. Trevor, call your attorney, Claire said calmly. Knee on Victoria's back. Tell him we have a third witness for the federal prosecution. Victoria screamed threats, promises, desperate bargains. Claire held her down until security arrived. Off-duty police officers Claire had contacted before Trevor's visit, positioned outside in case things escalated. As they escorted Victoria away in handcuffs, Trevor stood frozen in the apartment center. Dr. Daniels? Claire, I'll testify. I'll give him everything. But I need to know. His voice broke. Can you ever forgive me? Claire looked at him for a long moment. I can work with you toward justice, Mr. Hawthorne. Forgiveness is something you'll need to earn over years, not days. Start by telling the truth in court. She held out her hand. Trevor shook it. The beginning of accountability, not absolution. The shoes come off in federal court, Claire said quietly. And when they do, your mother finally gets her justice. Claire Daniels climbed the courthouse steps wearing her worn ballet flats, cleaned but not replaced. The custom medical inscriptions visible through the opened leather. Every news camera in South Carolina focused on those shoes. They become symbolic, evidence of invisible expertise, discarded value, and truth that walked past people trained not to see. Trevor Hawthorne stood at the top of the steps, flanked by his attorney but looking somehow smaller than his Forbes-listed net worth. When Claire reached him, he nodded. Solidarity, not friendship. Inside courtroom 4B, the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presided over United States versus Richard Pemberton et al., a case involving medical fraud, insurance fraud, racketeering, and 63 counts of criminally negligent homicide. Claire's shoes sat in a clear evidence box on the prosecutor's table, labeled Exhibit A. The Assistant U.S. Attorney, Jennifer Wu, called Claire to the stand. Dr. Daniels, please explain the significance of the shoes you wore while working at the Belmont restaurant. Claire spoke clearly, medical precision applied to legal testimony. These are custom orthopedic ballet flats I designed 3 years ago for Margaret Hawthorne, patient ID 847293, following her spinal fusion surgery. The design compensated for her gait irregularities and prevented pressure ulcers during recovery. I inscribed her name inside as standard practice for custom medical devices. She explained the micro-recording devices, technology originally designed for medical research, repurposed for investigation. 6 months of audio capturing Trevor Hawthorne and Richard Pemberton discussing their fraud scheme at the Belmont, where powerful men spoke freely around invisible servers. Margaret Hawthorne died from post-surgical sepsis on April 14th, 3 years ago. The infection resulted from protocol violations during Dr. Pemberton's initial surgery. Abbreviated sterilization procedures to reduce or time, substandard suture materials to cut costs, and inadequate post-operative monitoring to maximize bed turnover. When complications arose, Dr. Pemberton transferred Mrs. Hawthorne to my care and falsified surgical records to place liability on me. Claire's voice remained steady, professional, devastating. I discovered the fraudulent records and reported them through proper channels. Dr. Pemberton, as hospital board chairman, initiated an internal investigation that concluded I fabricated accusations to avoid malpractice liability. My medical license was suspended. I was effectively blacklisted from practicing medicine. Attorney Wu displayed documents on the courtroom screens. And what did you discover during your 18-month investigation at the Belmont? That Margaret Hawthorne was not an isolated case. I documented 62 additional patients who died from preventable complications after Dr. Pemberton fast-tracked their surgeries and falsified records. Each case resulted in insurance settlements ranging from $8 million to $15 million. Charleston Medical Center received the payouts, then used the funds to purchase commercial real estate from Hawthorne Development at inflated prices, effectively laundering the fraud proceeds through Trevor Hawthorne's company. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison gavelled for silence. Did Mr. Hawthorne knowingly participate in this fraud? Claire glanced at Trevor, sitting in the gallery with his head bowed. Initially, no. The evidence suggests Trevor Hawthorne was unknowingly laundering fraud proceeds through legitimate real estate transactions. However, recordings from 4 months ago confirm he became aware of the scheme and chose to continue profiting rather than reporting it. Trevor took the stand next. His testimony lasted 3 hours. Full confession, complete cooperation. Documents proving the conspiracy scope. He detailed how Pemberton had manipulated him, but took responsibility for choosing profit over ethics when the truth emerged. My mother called me 17 times in her final month, Trevor said, voice breaking. I answered 4 times. I was busy building an empire funded by her preventable death. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Victoria Brennan testified next. In exchange for reduced charges, she detailed Pemberton's operation, recruiting social manipulators, planting them near potential whistleblowers, creating controlled exposure scenarios to discredit threats before they could act. The Belmont shoe incident was textbook strategy. Forced revelation in humiliating circumstances, manufactured doubt about the accuser's stability. But Victoria hadn't counted on the shoes containing actual evidence, hadn't known the medical inscriptions would prove Claire's connection to Margaret, hadn't realized humiliating exposure could become powerful revelation. The trial lasted 11 days. Verdict: Richard Pemberton guilty on all 63 counts. Sentenced to 22 years federal prison. Medical license permanently revoked. 5 hospital administrators convicted on conspiracy charges. Charleston Medical Center placed under federal oversight. Victoria Brennan, 18 months federal prison. 5 years probation. Permanent ban from healthcare-related industries. Trevor Hawthorne, full immunity in exchange for testimony and financial restitution. Required to allocate $8 million from his inheritance to a victim compensation fund, surrender all properties purchased through fraudulent transactions, and perform 2,000 hours community service at free medical clinics. On the courthouse steps after sentencing, Judge Morrison made a rare public statement. This case represents everything wrong with systems that render certain people invisible based on job titles rather than expertise. Dr. Claire Daniels lost her career for telling the truth. She spent 18 months serving wine to the people who destroyed her, gathering evidence in shoes worth more than most people's monthly rent, shoes that represented her final patient interaction with Margaret Hawthorne. Judge Morrison held up the evidence box. These shoes are more than footwear. They represent invisible expertise, discarded value, and evidence hiding in plain sight. They remind us that the most powerful truths often walk right past people who've trained themselves not to see. The next day, the South Carolina Medical Board held an emergency session. Dr. Claire Daniels' medical license, fully reinstated, with formal apology for wrongful suspension. But Claire surprised everyone with her next move. She accepted a position at Charleston Medical Center, part-time surgeon, part-time patient advocate, and twice a week, she continued working evening shifts at the Belmont. When reporters asked why, Claire smiled. Because someone needs to keep watching. Because power performs differently when it thinks it's unobserved. And because invisible people see everything. She looked down at her shoes, the same worn ballet flats, now museum pieces she'd retrieved from evidence. Besides, these have a few miles left in them. And so do I. 6 months later, Dr. Claire Daniels stood in Operating Room 3 at Charleston Medical Center, hands steady as she performed a spinal fusion on a 19-year-old car accident victim. The surgery she'd been prevented from doing for 3 years flowed through her hands like muscle memory returning home. But on the wall of her new office, modest 3rd floor overlooking the parking lot, those worn ballet flats hung in a shadow box. Not retired, honored. The medical inscription still visible. Orthopedic design by Dr. Claire Daniels, MD patient, Margaret Hawthorne. Beneath the shadow box, a plaque read, "Evidence hides in plain sight. Justice belongs to those who refuse to stay invisible." Claire's practice had changed. She still performed surgeries, still saved lives, still innovated techniques. But now she also ran the hospital's patient advocacy office, investigating complaints, reviewing questionable cases, ensuring no doctor could silence whistleblowers the way Pemberton had silenced her. And twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she worked at the Belmont. Not because she needed the money, because power still congregated there, because wealthy people still spoke freely around servers they considered furniture, because someone needed to keep watching. Her recording devices were gone. That investigation was closed. But her eyes, her medical expertise, her refusal to be invisible, those remained. Trevor Hawthorne had kept his word. He'd sold Hawthorne Development, divesting from real estate entirely. The $8 million restitution fund provided compensation to 63 families whose loved ones died from Pemberton's fraud. Trevor now directed a medical ethics nonprofit, advocating for whistleblower protections and patient safety reforms. He'd visited Claire's office once, 3 months after the trial, brought flowers, apologized again, asked how he could help. Claire had shown him a list of medical students drowning in debt who couldn't afford to report misconduct without risking their careers. Trevor funded scholarships for all 27. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Victoria Brennan was 8 months into her sentence at a minimum security federal facility, teaching GED classes to other inmates. She'd written Claire one letter. No apology, but acknowledgement. "You were smarter than me. Wear better shoes next time." Claire had almost laughed. Almost. Tonight, her last shift at the Belmont for the week, a new waitress approached. Young, maybe 23, medical textbooks visible in her bag. "Dr. Daniels? I just started here. I'm in nursing school and—" She hesitated. "Everyone says you're the surgeon who exposed that fraud. The one with the shoes." Claire smiled. "That's me." The young waitress glanced down at Claire's feet. Different shoes now, newer, but similar style. "Why do you still work here? You're a doctor. You don't need this job." Claire looked around the Belmont's elegant dining room. Wealthy patrons, expensive wine, conversations happening around invisible servers. "I work here because what people see isn't always what's real. Because the most powerful evidence often walks right past people who've trained themselves not to see. And because someone needs to remember that invisible doesn't mean powerless." She touched the young waitress's shoulder gently. "You're in nursing school. You'll see things, hear things. Don't convince yourself it's not your business. It's always your business when someone's life is at stake." The waitress nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. As Claire walked through the Belmont's dining room one last time that night, she passed table 12, Trevor Hawthorne's old table. A new billionaire sat there now, speaking quietly with hospital administrators, discussing cost-cutting measures and efficiency protocols. Claire smiled and kept walking, but she listened, because invisible people see everything. And the shoes, worn, honored, retired, but remembered, had taught Charleston's powerful and important lesson. Evidence walks past you every day. You just have to train yourself to see.